The morning light broke over the fields east of Deir el-Balah, a small town in the heart of the Gaza Strip, where two white Red Cross vehicles stood quietly on the dusty road. Their engines hummed softly, a faint sound against the otherwise tense silence that hung in the air. For the few who had gathered nearby, this moment was more than routine. It was the solemn return of human remains, the fragile trace of two men whose names had haunted both sides of this conflict for almost a year, Tamir Adar and Aryeh Zalmanovich. Their faces had once been shown on posters across Israel, their names shouted in weekly rallies outside the Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem and at hostages' squares in Tel Aviv. Both men were among the more than 200 hostages taken when Hamas launched its deadly cross-border assault on October 7, 2024, the day that upended every calculation in this war. In the months that followed, their fates remained uncertain, their families trapped in a cycle of hope and despair. Today, that uncertainty finally ended, though not in the way anyone had prayed for. The Ezzedine al-Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas, handed over the remains of the two Israelis to the International Committee of the Red Cross as part of the latest exchange arrangement between Israel and Hamas. According to Palestinian sources, the bodies had been buried for months inside Gaza and were exhumed overnight before being transported under Red Cross supervision to the transfer point east of Deir el-Balah. The exchange was carried out with precision and restraint. Red Cross personnel, wearing protective gloves and the familiar white vests with red emblems, moved carefully around the vehicles. Their task was not only logistical, it was humanitarian and symbolic, a small gesture of dignity amid a war defined by its absence. The Israeli army, hours later, confirmed the identities. Military spokesperson Daniel Hagari told reporters in Tel Aviv that forensic teams had matched DNA and other evidence confirming that the remains were indeed those of Tamir Adar, the 38-year-old grandson of Holocaust survivor Yafa Adar, and Aryeh Zalmanovich, an 86-year-old resident of Kibbutz Nir Oz. Both had been abducted from their homes during the October attack. The army's statement was short but heavy with emotion. Their families have been informed and the nation bows its head in grief. The words resonated across Israel, where the debate over how to bring home the remaining hostages continues to divide politicians and the public alike. Back in Gaza, the operation itself unfolded quietly. Red Cross teams arrived in the morning, escorted by Palestinian security personnel, moving slowly through a narrow corridor cleared for the transfer. Cameras captured the scene, the white vehicle stopping briefly near a small tent, the doors opening, stretchers being moved under canvas and then closing again. There were no flags, no crowds, no chants, just a long, steady silence that carried more weight than any speech could. Within minutes, the convoy turned back west toward the Israeli border crossing, escorted until the edge of the demarcation line. Dust rose behind the vehicles as they departed, shimmering in the afternoon sun, a faint image that would soon circle global news feeds. For many, this exchange is a reminder of the delicate mechanics that keep the ceasefire framework alive. Each transfer, whether of prisoners, hostages, or remains, is a test of coordination between sworn enemies who, for fleeting moments, must trust intermediaries like the Red Cross. The organization's neutral role remains essential. Its emblem, visible on every frame of this scene, represents one of the few symbols still accepted by both sides as untouchable. But this operation was more than a logistical event. It was another entry in a long, painful ledger of loss that defines this war's human toll. Tamir Adar's family had waited almost a full year for news. They had last seen him in a hostage video released in December 2024, showing him alive, though injured. After that, nothing. His father told Israeli media just months ago that he refused to give up hope. For the Zalmanovich family, the agony stretched even longer. Aryeh, one of the oldest hostages taken, was a retired farmer known for his quiet humor and devotion to his kibbutz community. He was taken from his home during the early morning assault that killed dozens of his neighbors. Now both men return not as survivors, but as symbols, reminders of what still hangs in the balance. In Jerusalem, the Prime Minister's office released a brief statement calling the recovery of the bodies a sacred duty and vowing to continue efforts to bring every hostage, living or dead, home. Opposition lawmakers echoed that sentiment, though many also renewed criticism of the government's handling of the ceasefire deal, saying it had stalled without delivering enough results. In Gaza, Hamas representatives framed the transfer differently as part of what they called a balanced exchange process that also includes the release of Palestinian detainees from Israeli prisons. A spokesperson for the group's political wing told Al-Aqsa TV that this is proof that negotiations continue under clear conditions, insisting that Israel must also fulfill its commitments. Neither side confirmed the exact number of prisoners released in parallel, but Israeli media reported that at least 4 Palestinian women were freed from Ofer prison late Tuesday night as part of the same framework. For the Red Cross, the focus remained strictly humanitarian. In a statement, the organisation reaffirmed that its mission was to facilitate the dignified transfer of human remains and ensure that families receive closure, irrespective of politics. No ICRC representatives spoke on camera, but officials on the ground said the transfer had taken place safely and respectfully. This moment adds another chapter to the slow, grinding process that has defined the post-ceasefire environment. After the US brokered truce earlier this year, both Israel and Hamas agreed to limited exchanges tied to humanitarian commitments, but progress has been uneven. Some bodies have been returned, others remain missing, and many families continue to live in limbo. For every return, there is also political fallout. Inside Israel, the images of Red Cross vehicles crossing the border provoke not only sorrow but also anger. Critics of Prime Minister Netanyahu accuse his government of doing too little, too late. Supporters argue that such exchanges are a vital step toward resolving one of the war's most painful legacies. The issue of hostages remains central to the fragile ceasefire. According to Israeli authorities, around 64 hostages are still unaccounted for, while Hamas claims several of them were killed in Israeli airstrikes. Negotiations mediated by Egypt and Qatar continue, but both sides accuse each other of stalling. The return of remains, rather than living captives, underscores how narrow the humanitarian space has become. At the transfer site, once the convoy departed, local residents emerged from nearby fields to watch. For them, it was another sign of a conflict that still shapes every horizon. "We are tired of seeing bodies move in and out," one resident told a journalist quietly. "We want this to end, for them and for us." His voice captured a sentiment rarely shown on official broadcasts, but widely felt across Gaza: exhaustion. In Israel, funerals will follow. The remains of Adar and Zalmanovich are expected to be laid to rest with full military honours. Communities will gather, flags will fly at half-mast, and public mourning will once again mix with political tension. The story, however, will not close there. Each time the Red Cross mediates such a transfer, it sparks new questions about accountability, exchange ratios, and future diplomacy. How many hostages will ultimately come home alive? How many more will return this way, in silence, wrapped in flags? As the Red Cross vehicles disappeared beyond the checkpoint, their tail lights fading into the distance, the scene left behind was one of quiet finality. In the dust-filled air, the only trace of their passage was the faint imprint of tyres and the enduring weight of what they carried. From Deir el-Bala to Jerusalem, from Tel Aviv to Rafah, this small operation reverberated across a region still haunted by the ghosts of October 7th. For the families who now know, closure comes hand in hand with heartbreak. For those still waiting, the uncertainty deepens. And for the mediators, the diplomats and the soldiers, the work continues, slow, cautious, and often thankless. This is the reality of post-war Gaza. Exchanges measured not only in numbers, but in human lives, negotiated in whispers and carried out under the watchful eye of a world that still struggles to make sense of it all. Tonight, 2 families in Israel will finally be able to bury their sons. For them, the long nightmare has reached its end. But for countless others, the road to resolution remains uncertain, a road that, for now, still runs through the dusty fields of Deir el-Bala.
Go.